wheels of the stagecoach groaned against the rocky trail as it descended into Millerville, a small outpost nestled along the southern edge of the Rocky Mountains. The year was 1873, and the air in these parts was thick with dust, secrets, and something sharper, survival. Smoke curled from chimneys of shanty cabins dotting the hillsides, mingling with the biting scent of dried sage and horse sweat. The sky above stretched endless and blue, unbroken by trees or towers, just miles of open land where God could see everything and the law didn't see enough. Inside the coach sat a woman wrapped in a faded wool shawl, hands gloved in old leather, holding a canvas bag stitched at the corners with care. Clara May, 38 years old, once the wife of a wheat farmer in Kansas, now a widow, a wanderer, and a soul looking for a place that would let her start again or let her die in peace. The bag held all she owned: 3 cotton dresses, her grandmother's weathered Bible, a tin of sewing needles, and a photograph so faded you could barely see the faces anymore. But she remembered them. Every wrinkle in her husband's brow, the curve of his smile before the fever took him, the smell of wheat and pipe smoke in their kitchen back in Abilene. The stage pulled to a halt with a hiss of brakes and the rattle of chains. Clara adjusted her bonnet and stepped out into the sunlight. The town was barely more than a scattering of buildings, a crooked saloon with stained windows and broken piano music leaking out, a blacksmith shop whose anvil rang with every strike, and a general store with a porch sagging under crates of dried goods and gossip. Children ran barefoot through the dirt, chased by dogs and the occasional warning shout from tired mothers. Clara's boots struck the ground with a dull thud. Dust rose around her hem like ghosts. She stood tall despite the ache in her back from 3 days of travel. Her eyes were sharp, clear, and betrayed none of the fear twisting in her gut. She knew what folks thought when they saw a woman like her alone, broken, desperate, easy to dismiss. A wiry man with a waxed mustache and a star pinned to his vest stepped forward. "Sheriff Dawson, you the one bound for Thorn Ridge?" "I am," Clara said, her voice steady, plain. He nodded, tipping his hat. "You sure about that? Lot of folks been up that way. None stayed long." "I've nowhere else to be," she said, and that was that. He pointed toward the hitching post. "Wagon'll take you as far as Carter's Ridge. After that, you're on your own. Thorn Ridge is up past the gulch, near the old miner's trail, 4 miles horseback, steep climb." Clara gave a small nod. "I can walk it." The sheriff grunted, impressed or amused, it was hard to tell. "Suit yourself." She boarded the wagon an hour later, sitting beside a quiet man who chewed tobacco and never once looked her in the eye. The trail out of Millerville rose into the hills, where cottonwoods whispered in the wind and the air grew cooler. Hawks circled overhead. Coyotes lurked just out of sight. The wagon left her at a wooden crossroad post with a faded sign. "Thorn Ridge, 4 mile." She walked. The trail was narrow and rutted, winding past dry creek beds and crumbling fence lines. Her boots kicked up gravel, her breath caught with each incline. The land here was hard, red, sun-baked earth, shrubs clawing their way out of the cracks. Nothing came easy. Clara paused once to drink from a flask of warm water, her hand trembling slightly as she wiped sweat from her brow. She reached the ranch just before dusk. It sat like a sentinel on the ridge, framed by wind-worn trees and endless sky. The house was 2 stories, made of aged timber, its shutters hanging askew. The front porch sagged in the middle. A weather vane spun lazily atop the barn. A split-rail fence wrapped around the fields, and beyond them, black cattle grazed in the dry grass, swishing their tails as the wind stirred. Clara climbed the steps and knocked once on the door. It opened slowly, revealing a man tall and lean, with a sun-leathered face, grizzled jaw, and blue eyes that had seen too much war and not enough peace. Eli Thatcher. He looked at her like a man looks at weather measuring, cautious, already expecting it to turn. "You're the new help?" he asked, voice low, quiet as gravel. "Yes," Clara replied. A pause, a moment stretched thin by tension. Then he stepped aside. "You'll sleep in the south room. Water's out back. We start at dawn." She entered without flinching. The door closed behind her with a heavy click. Outside, the last light of day bled into the horizon like an old wound, and the Rockies stood silent, watching. The south room smelled like dry wood, old sweat, and forgotten time. Clara set her bag gently on the iron frame bed, its springs creaking in protest. A single window looked out over the rear pasture, where the last embers of sunset painted the grass in burnt gold. There was no curtain, only a crooked rod where one used to hang. On the table stood a chipped basin and an oil lamp half filled. The floor bore marks of boots long gone, and cobwebs clung to corners like whispers of the past. She unpacked in silence, folding her dresses with care, setting the Bible on the nightstand, and placing the faded photograph beside it. Then she rolled up her sleeves and went to work. No one told her what to clean. No one had to. The house was large but hollow. Dust coated every surface: mantels, floorboards, windowsills. The kitchen was functional but cold. Pots were stacked with soot still inside. A lone wooden spoon rested in the sink like a forgotten soldier. She lit the stove, opened the windows, and scrubbed with a rhythm learned from years of hard living. By the time she washed her hands in the back trough, the sun was long gone. Coyotes howled in the distance. The wind whistled through the cracks in the walls like a ghost warning her not to get comfortable. At dawn, she rose before the rooster did. Eli was already outside, feeding the horses. The corral was a wide fenced patch of churned earth beside the barn, where two bay mares snorted impatiently and stomped against the cold ground. Clara approached quietly, but not timidly. "You any good with feed?" Eli asked, tossing oats into a trough. "I used to run a farm," she answered. "That a yes?" "That's a yes." He handed her a pail and didn't speak again for the next hour. They worked in silence, save for the soft clinks of iron gates and the occasional grumble of cattle. Clara noted the efficiency in his movements: precise, practiced. A man who trusted animals more than people. She spent the morning repairing the chicken coop. Hens scattered as she patched holes in the wire, using spare planks from the barn. Her hands were calloused from Kansas soil, and by noon they bled anew. She welcomed it. Pain meant purpose. Later she found the garden. Overgrown, wild, and choking on weeds. Tomato cages sat rusted. Carrot beds had been overtaken by thistle. She knelt, hands plunging into the dry earth, pulling roots and thorns with steady determination. It was backbreaking work, but it reminded her of life: messy, painful, and worth the effort. When she returned to the house to clean the parlor, she found something that made her stop cold. On the mantel above the cold hearth was a book, Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. She opened it gently, revealing delicate handwriting in the margins. Notes, thoughts, emotions. Tucked inside was a flattened rose, its petals preserved. Pressed between page 42 and 43, where the poem read, "I believe in you, my soul. The other I am must not abase itself to you." Clara stared at it for a long while. This house, this man, was not what it seemed. The chess set was next. Tucked away on a dusty side table near the window, the board was hand-carved, the pieces uneven but crafted with care. She noticed the queen was missing. Every other piece was intact: kings, bishops, pawns, all carefully arranged as if someone had played a game and never returned to finish. That night they ate in silence. The dining table, long and scarred, had seen better years. Eli served beans and cured ham. Clara didn't complain. Hunger makes kings of plain meals. He broke the silence. "You find the garden?" "I did." "Overrun?" "Yes, but salvageable." He nodded. "My mother used to keep it, before she passed." Clara paused. "She pressed roses?" Eli looked up, surprised. "You saw the book?" "It's beautiful," she said simply. He said nothing more, but something in his posture shifted. Less guarded, less stone. After dinner he poured 2 mugs of strong coffee and set up the chessboard. Without a word, he motioned for her to sit. She took the black side. "I don't have a queen," he muttered. "I've played worse hands." They played in quiet focus. Her moves were deliberate, cautious. His were blunt but thoughtful. It was a good match, 2 people who had lost too much to waste time on small talk. Before bed, Clara stepped onto the porch. The night was cool, moonlight casting silver across the ridgeline. The air smelled of cattle, pine, and distant rain. Somewhere in the dark, an owl hooted. She closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time she felt still. It began with a stillness. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a shade too quiet, muted steel, like the color of a loaded gun before the trigger. The cattle huddled close to the fence line. The chickens refused to leave the coop. Even the wind, usually restless, held its breath. Clara looked up from the garden, dirt under her nails, weeds bundled at her feet. "It's coming," she whispered, wiping sweat from her brow. Eli stepped onto the porch, sleeves rolled to his elbows, eyes scanning the horizon. Monsoon out of the mountains, could hit hard. She nodded. "What do you need?" He looked at her, weighing the question like it was more than just about weather. "Help me brace the barn." They worked fast. Together they lashed ropes across the barn doors, tied down loose tools, and herded the cattle closer to the southern wall for cover. Jake, the ranch hand, had ridden out that morning to check on the northern trail and wouldn't return before nightfall. Thunder cracked once, then again, closer. Rain came in thick sheets, falling like nails on the rooftop. The barn shuddered with each gust of wind. Clara's bonnet was soaked within minutes, and her dress clung to her legs as she shoveled hay toward the center stall. Lightning lit the rafters in white veins. Then came the sound, a sharp, panicked bellow. One of the cows was calving, and it was going badly. Clara rushed to the stall. The mother cow was down, side-heaving, eyes wide with strain. Her back legs kicked against the dirt, but nothing was moving. Eli stood at the threshold, frozen for a moment, rain dripping from his brim. "I don't," he started. "I do," Clara said firmly, dropping to her knees. She had seen it before. Back on their farm in Kansas. 5 years, 6 calvings. 2 went wrong. 1 nearly killed her husband. She wasn't about to let this one die. "Get me water," she barked, "and a blanket." Eli moved fast. No more hesitation. Clara rolled up her sleeves, whispered calming words to the animal, and slid her arms inside, fingers searching, heart pounding. The calf was turned. Breech. Wrong angle. She grit her teeth and adjusted it inch by inch, mud and blood slicking her arms. The cow moaned low, her body jerking. Thunder roared above them. "You're doing good, girl," Clara whispered. "Don't give up on me now." Eli returned with the blanket and bucket, eyes wide as he knelt beside her. "What can I do?" "Hold her steady. She's close." With one final heave, Clara pulled, and the calf slipped free, hitting the straw with a wet thud. It didn't move at first. For one terrifying second, the barn was silent except for the storm. Then it coughed twice and let out a tiny cry. Clara exhaled, shoulders sagging. She wiped her brow with the back of her arm, smearing mud across her cheek. Eli stared at her, stunned. "You saved it," he said, voice low, full of something unreadable. "She did most of the work," Clara replied, nodding at the exhausted mother. They worked together to dry the calf, rubbing it down with burlap sacks until it stood on wobbly legs. Outside, the wind howled, but inside the barn, a strange calm settled, like something old and bitter had finally taken a step back. After securing the doors one last time, they returned to the house soaked through and shivering. Clara stripped off her wet boots and stood by the stove, her teeth chattering. Eli tossed a dry towel her way. "Here." "Thank you," she said softly. "I haven't seen someone handle a calving like that since—" He stopped himself, jaw tightening. Clara didn't press. Instead, she poured 2 mugs of coffee, her hands still trembling slightly. They sat in silence, steam rising between them. "You didn't have to do that," he finally said. "I did." He studied her for a long time. Then, in a voice as quiet as the night, he added, "You're not like the others." She met his gaze. "Number I'm not." That night, Clara lay in bed listening to the storm fade into distant rumble. The smell of wet wood lingered in the walls. Her muscles ached. Her heart was strangely light. The land had tested her, and she had stood firm. Outside, in the barn, a newborn calf breathed softly beneath its mother's flank, and in the stillness of Thorn Ridge, something new had begun, fragile, like life, but growing.